Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my opinion on the best AD carries for patch 6.2. I'm not going to be including Jhin in this video though, because he wasn't released at the start of patch 6.2, so if he is good, he will be in my next list for patch 6.3, but as of right now, I'm not going to include him for this patch. So first up on the list is going to be Vayne. Vayne is one of the best late game AD carries in the game. Her early game does lack a little bit compared to some of the other AD carries in the game, but if you can get to that mid game as Vayne and get to that late game, then you can just start absolutely destroying. She just does so much damage because of the true damage that she gets with her W, and her ultimate also gives her extra damage, so she can just, as long as she can position well in those mid to late game team fights, then she can solo carry really hard. She also does have good mobility with her Q, and that's on like a 2 or 3 second cooldown once you get that maxed out and once you are using it in late game team fights, so she can just stay really mobile with that. She also does have the stealth with her ultimate, so it just makes her really hard to kill in teamfights as long as you are using your Q correctly. A few cons to Vayne though are that she is shorter range compared to some of the other AD carries, and she is a little bit harder to play as well in my opinion. Next up on my list, I have Ezreal. So I think that Ezreal is actually pretty underrated for solo queue right now. He's been seeing a lot of play in competitive. He doesn't have the best win rate in competitive. I actually looked at his win rate and it's under 50%, but for solo queue, I do think he's actually a very strong pick just due to the fact that games aren't lasting too long right now, and he's also a really good pick against Assassin since he does have the gap closer on his E, and he also does end up building the scimitar for his second or third item. He also does have the Iceborne Gauntlet, which he's going to go if he does end up going blue Ezreal, and he can kite around really nicely with that item and just stay really safe, and it just enables him to peel for himself really nicely in those team fights. He does have one of the stronger early to mid games for any champion in the game, which is why I do think he is a pretty strong pick right now. He also does have good poke with his Q, and he's one of the safer laners in the game, or he does have one of the safer laning phases in the game, because if he is in a harder matchup, then he can just sit back and farm with his Q if he needs to. A few cons to Ezreal though are that he is very skill shot reliant with his Q, because that does deal most of his damage, or it is his main damage source, and he is also pretty weak if he does fall behind. Next on my list, I have Corky. So Corky is the strongest, I'm gonna say, mid-game AD carry in the game. You could argue that maybe Lucian or Ezreal does have a good mid-game as well, but I would say that Corky does have one of the strongest mid-games for any AD carry in the game, that's for sure. Once you get your Trinity Force on Corky, make sure that you tell your team to group up, look to siege down towers, look to take Dragon, or look to take Herald. Just make sure that you aren't putting your mid-game power spike to waste. He's got really good poke as well with his ultimate. He's got the gap closer on his W, which makes him a very safe AD carry as well, and he is very bursty. Once you do hit level 6 as Corky and you have your Sheen and your Phage, you can duel pretty much any other AD carry in the game, and I would recommend pairing Corky up with a support that's got a good all-in like a Leona or a Thresh or a Blitzcrank, because at level 6, as long as they can hit their CC, then Corky can just easily follow that up with a lot of burst damage, and if he's got the package, which he does get around, like, once he's about level 6, he gets the package, so if he's got that as well, it's pretty much a free kill if you do have a good all-in support, so definitely try to convince your support to play an all-in one instead of a passive one like a Soraka or a Nami or a Sona. Definitely play a support that does have good lockdown or good engage. And he does have the armor shred with his E, which is also a nice part of his kit. A few cons to Corky though is that he does fall off late game compared to some of the other AD carries like a Tristana or a Vayne, and he is also somewhat skill shot reliant with his Q and his ultimate. Next on my list, I have Lucian. So Lucian is a very good overall AD carry. He really doesn't struggle at any point in the game. He's got a good early game, his mid game is pretty good, and then his late game is also not that bad either. He's a good laner if you do pair him up with a strong CC support as well, because he is a very bursty AD carry like Corky. So if you are playing as Lucian, just try to convince your support to play someone who does have a good all-in. He's also great with the Essence Reaver. I never find myself running low low on mana now when I build that item on Lucian, whereas before when that item wasn't in the game or when it didn't have the passive, I would always run out of mana on him. So just make sure that you are rushing that item first when you are playing as Lucian. He's a very mobile AD carry as well with his E, and he is also a very good duelist. His ultimate can pretty much one-shot an enemy squishy in the mid to late game as well, so that just makes his ultimate a really strong ability, and it can also be used for wave clear. If you've got 40% CDR on Lucian, which you can get if you end up getting CDR boots and Essence Reaver, then his ultimate's on a 50-second cooldown once it's at rank 3, so never be afraid to use that to just clear out a wave or get some poke off in a team fight. And one con to Lucian though is that he is weak against Braum. If you are looking for a good counter Lucian, since he is being played a lot, I would recommend picking him since he can just stand there with his E and soak up all of Lucian's ultimate damage, and it just makes it really hard for Lucian to clear waves with his ult and to get a good amount of damage off with his culling in a team fight. So pick Braum if you are against Lucian and you are a strong Braum player. And to round out my top 5 for this patch, I have Misfortune. Right now, Misfortune is still sitting at the highest win rate for any AD carry in the game, and that's really no surprise because she hasn't been nerfed enough, I don't think at least. And also, Rengar got a pretty big nerf this patch, and Rengar was a good counter to Misfortune, but with him not being played as much anymore, I feel like she might have actually gotten stronger this patch, which is pretty crazy. She's got a really good early game. Her level 6 all-in is one of the best in the game. The amount of damage that you can do in those team fights and in the laning phase with your ultimate as Misfortune is just, it's pretty crazy. I would definitely play her with a good lockdown support like a Morgana or a Leona or a Nautilus, because then you can just get a fully channeled ultimate off and you can just deal so much damage. She also does have pretty good poke in the laning phase with her Q. Her zoning potential in mid to late game team fights is also quite good with her E. One con to MF though is that she does not have a gap closure, so you do want to pick up a QSS sooner than later on her. You're going to be getting focused pretty hard in mid-game team fights, so if the enemy team does have strong CC or if they have a Z, then definitely pick the QSS up, pick that up as your second or your third item, because it's just going to allow you to stay a lot safer in those team fights. So first up on the honorable mentions, I have Caitlyn. Caitlyn is a very strong early game AD carry. I would only play her though if you are going to take advantage of her early game and you know how to take advantage of her early game, because if you don't, then you're going to get outscaled in the mid game by a lot of the mid game oriented or focused AD carries right now, like Ezreal and Corky and Lucian. And I think that Caitlyn is a good pick, but if you don't have a good early game on her, then she is going to be relatively weaker come mid game. Next up on the honorable mentions, I have Tristana. So Tristana is a very strong late game AD carry. Her early game also isn't all that bad. Her level 6 all-in is actually quite good. So if you do pair her up with a strong engage support, make sure that you do try to go for an all-in at level 6. Her tower pushing ability is also the best for any AD carry in the game, I'm gonna call it. Jinx is a close second, but I do think Tristana does take the cake when it comes to tower pushing for AD carries. So if you're just looking for a strong overall AD carry, then I would play Tristana. Next, I have Calista. So you guys might be surprised that Calista was not on my top 5 just because she's been a pick or ban in competitive play lately, but I feel that solo queue Calista is a lot different than competitive play Calista just because she's a lot harder to play than some of the other AD carries in the game, and unless you know how to use your passive correctly, then she isn't going to be the most rewarding AD carry in the game, since she can just get cut out really easily if the enemy team does have a long range engage or if they do have an assassin. So I would say play her if you're a good or if you're a great Calista player, but if you're average on her or if you just don't know how to use your passive correctly, then I would just stick to one of the other easier AD carries on my list. And last but not least on the honorable mentions for this patch, I have Graves. So Graves jungle is pretty OP right now, as well as Graves top, but why not play Graves AD carry as well? He's actually quite strong. If he isn't banned, of course, then I would recommend playing him jungle first, because I do think jungle Graves is a little bit better, but if your team is already locked in jungle, then picking Graves AD carry isn't all that bad of an idea either. He's got really good burst, and his mid to late game is just absolutely crazy, so if he isn't banned, then definitely pick him, but just due to the fact that he's pretty much permabanned right now, he's not on my top 5, and also just because he's a stronger jungler in my opinion, that's why he's not on my top 5. So that is all for the video, guys. If you did enjoy, then be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.